Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone, and to all the wonderful people joining us from around the world. Welcome to third week of DevSecOps internship program. Right. So let's try to understand if you anyone have any doubts from the last two sessions, you can go ahead and ask the questions out here. So I will address it before I move on to the today's session on that. So any doubt from the previous sessions or questions from the previous sessions is fine. Okay. Yeah, that's good. We don't have any kind of inquiry. I think everyone is on the same page. Let's move ahead with that. So today, it is a wonderful topic that we are going to do, and it is a very good, important milestone when you're reaching talking about cybersecurity and career perspective in today's world. And what topic we are going to discuss here has a huge impact, right? And we are seeing a lot of traction on this particular topic in the industry. And why? One of the reasons why, which is this is where the emphasis is basically about. You know, this is where a lot of things, a lot of cybersecurity components come into play and merge. That's the important thing that comes out of here. So yes, as you can guess it, as you can see on the screen, today we're going to talk about DevSecOps, right? In the first week, we talk about security awareness, where we introduced you to. I think some of you have having your Microsoft microphone on. Can you put it on mute? Yeah. As I was telling, in the first week, we talk about security awareness, and this is where we introduce you to cybersecurity, right? What exactly is a threat? What do you mean by an, breach, and what is by an incident, and what are the different attack vectors? And attacker will look into that place. Yeah, those are the things that we see, and it is where if you're new to the cybersecurity, this is where you were baptized into cybersecurity concepts and into that. In the second week, we spoke about a very particular, a role, penetration testing and infrastructure, where here we are talking about how an attacker would go into breaching that. Whatever the problems we saw, which we were introduced in security awareness, we saw what is the process taken by the hacker to do this, and how does a penetration tester is actually doing it, exact replica of what an attacker would do. But here the only difference is that we are doing with permission, that is ethically we are doing out there. And once we're done with it, we're also helping the team build up a security around that. So how do you mitigate the issues with the face portal? We will see as we speak much more further. There is limitations or there is some kind of an issues with penetration testing, and that could actually have an issue, and how our DevSecOps is actually coming to the rescue for the same situation. That is the main criteria that we look up, and this is a very important role. And the DevSecOps is a very new role, and we have not been seeing. And nowadays, a lot of companies are moving towards DevOps, and they also want to start up DevSecOps. Right? We will see about that as well. So first, let's talk about what is DevOps. Can be best explained as people working together to conceive, build, and deliver secure software at top speed. Practices enable software and operations team to accelerate delivery through automation, collaboration, feedback, and iterative movement. Right? Stemming from agile approach to software development, developers expand the cross-functional approach of building and shipping applications into fast and more iterative manner. So what does this mean? There's a huge definition for this. What exactly is going to mean on there? Right? So DevSecOps, in pen testing, we have a certain set of steps. When we follow that steps, and we call it is the penetration testing, a set number of steps has to be done. When we talk about DevOps, there is no certain steps that has to be followed. It is more of a cultural approach. It is more of a cultural approach than a kind of a steps that is going to be followed up there. So what happens, you can see, but there is a cultural difference where we look at the software industry, where the process of developing an application has changed significantly, right? In the previously, what used to happen, we used to have a software development lifecycle called waterfall model. There we used to collect a bunch of requirements, and then we are going to develop that application on top of that. And they had a complete phase, design phase, implementation, coding, testing, and then finally we are going to put it on the production and check it out. Again, there is a post-production testing phase as well and maintenance phase. But for this process to go start and end, it would take about on a bare minimum amount of time for a project to close. It's a very small project, everything got done and everything else. It is going to take bare minimum of 3 months. And I've seen on an average, it takes about 6 months. This is very early stages. I'm not talking about 2015 or 2018. I'm talking about in the year 2005 or 2003. And that time, it also makes sense. Those times, the applications that were used where IT was more predominantly were in banking and insurance or large applications, right? So banking, core banking software and things and all, where you could talk about insurance and things and all, the components are going to be quite staying common of them. They don't change requirement. For instance, let's say your banking process, you are going to go and deposit your money in the bank, you are going to earn interest on that. Whenever you feel they need the money, you are going to withdraw the money. The process is going to remain the same on that. It is not going to change. So it makes sense to have a waterfall model, which is much more you collect all the requirement at once and go with it. But as the industry grew further, and we saw that what happened was this is no longer going to work. For instance, you see that online platforms started building online sales, online, retail, and everything comes to play. But there, the application is no longer standard. It is going to keep on changing. For instance, if you open your Amazon, right? When you open your Amazon web page, probably every 10 days or even every day, the page layout is going to change, meaning they're going to add more new ads. They're going to add more new offers into that and keeps on changing out there. And we can't have that approach, right? We can't have that approach for that. For instance, let's say if you want to have some kind of an sale or kind of an activity for Christmas, if you're going for a waterfall model, Amazon has to start prepping up for 6 months in advance. And if they have any issues during the implementation, right, during the December month, when they have an implementation issue, they're going to completely miss the process, right? That is going to happen with it. So in order to overcome this kind of an issue, they came up with a different approach, the agile methodology. Agile methodology breaks up your requirements. Instead of having me having 10, 30 requirements, I'm going to focus on first five requirements in the couple of 1 or 2 weeks time, and I'll fix those requirements. And then if nothing goes wrong with those, and then move on to the next set of requirements. But when you go for this kind of an approach, it also means that you are dividing the applications into multiple pieces. And previously, what was the issue? The time it was taking in waterfall model was that taking different components and making them work together. They have to attach it, right? It is like it going to have it will not going to be easy. So when agile methodology came into play, they saw, right, we can have an independent component, and that is why those independent component are called microservices. Rather than having a one huge system, having multiple independent components, dividing the same things into independent components, right? So now what happens is that what you are doing multiple couple of times in a waterfall model, you are doing it quite often, right? You're pushing the code to the repository quite often, you're downloading the code quite often, you're building the application again and again, and things like that. Human manpower is expensive. The more you're doing certain activities, dumb activities, right? For instance, let's say an automation in your house every day, that what is that you're going to use? The automation that you use every day in your house is your washing machine, right? So that activity, which is a very difficult activity, it will consume a lot of your time, which requires less amount of intelligence, but it is the same repetition process, right? That is what automation is about, giving that repetitive process a less intelligent set of activities to be machined, and washing machine does it for you. Similarly, the CI/CD pipeline was developed for this approach. Okay, so now CI/CD pipeline comes into play, and DevOps and everyone comes into play, and a lot of things activities are happening. The repetitive process can be automated, and there comes the DevOps, right? It is not mandatory that CI/CD is important, but again, dividing a large application into microservices that is comes under DevOps, where the developer is also doing a testing process and things like that, right? That is what basically DevOps is that, and how can you get the product to the market at a faster rate? That is what are the things that can be done. So that's going to be process for DevOps, right? I think some of you is having your microphone on. Can you please check and switch it off? Right? So, but DevOps is an excellent process, right? That you are getting a lot of things, and you actually companies are saving a lot of money on DevOps, right? They are able to not only in terms of operation cost, they're able to get the product much more faster to the market. Because of this, what happens? They are able to make more money because they're able to sell more products, more profit comes into play. DevOps is very important, and way it is being used, it is that you can see, and that is why there's a huge demand for GitLabs, GitHub, and Kubernetes, Dockers, and everything, because it helps them streamline the process. It is less dependent. If people are leaving, if there's attrition rate is high, it's quite easy for someone to come in and understand what's happening out there. But there is a drawback in terms of security. In terms of security, we have seen there's a huge amount of drawback out there compared to traditional applications, right? So always security is always a compromise. You can never give that full-fledged security, because you always have to decide what is the ease of doing a certain activity and what is the secure way of doing certain activity, right? And we also have to understand what security is needed. For instance, let's say if you're having a chocolate bar, are you going to save the chocolate bar, store the chocolate bar in a refrigerator and lock the refrigerator, or are you going to put the chocolate bar in a iron safe, right? Probably on your refrigerator itself. The same thing goes on. What if you are having a jewel or some cash out there, very high value cash? What you're going to do? Probably you're not going to use your refrigerator for that, right? So we are prioritizing what security is needed, what is that is important out there, and also understanding what is the ease of using it, right? DevOps actually brings up speed, but adding security to that, it is going to reduce the speed of the DevOps. The timeline required for that is going to be problematic. For instance, if I'm having security penetration testing at each and every feature that is going to be added out there, it is going to be process. It's going to add time for that. Second part is automating of vulnerabilities, right? It requires the problem with the DevSecOps or in the industry right now, why there is a sudden increase or requirement for the openings for cybersecurity so high is that there's a severe skill shortage. Cybersecurity is not easy for everyone, and it takes a lot of time to master it as well, right? Without proper guidance, it is going to be a proper help out there to go through that part. So now we need to allow, since we can't have developers and enough number of penetration tester to developer ratio, we need to train our developers to do the security part. But from a pen testing perspective, it is going to be very, very difficult for them, right? So this is where a lot of automation tool comes, where they just have to run some kind of a tool and it will do the activity for them, right? So that is also is going to be there. And lack of security integration, right? In DevOps, you might have seen if you have attended seminars, and you'll see there's a way they integrate the code and the building process and how to bring it to the testing environment and production environment. There's a flow, there's a dance that is happening out there, and it goes from one process to another process in a very seamless way, right? And that lacked earlier in the security integration in DevOps. Getting your security controls in setup in a DevOps is very difficult out there, right? And fourth part is insufficient security skills. As we've spoken earlier, security is very difficult. I've seen a lot of my students and a lot of my colleagues who have quit security when they It was taking a lot of time toll on them, right? But nowadays, the tools are sufficient enough where it gives them the flexibility to relax a bit, and we'll see that all those things are is there, right? There is also lack of cultural shift. Cultural shift, what do you mean from cultural shift here, right? Cultural shift, what happens is that the organization, the people in the organization, or don't understand what is the security is about, right? They don't understand what security is about. Their approach to products development and maintaining or doing stuffs in the organization is quite old fashioned, and they don't understand the importance of it, right? It could be shoulder surfing, trying to locking their laptops, lock screen, enabling it before going for a cup of coffee, making sure that when they swipe in, no one else is, back of them, piggybacking into their office, or all those things, right? That's very small things that are there. And again, at the computer level, having a good quality password and things. People don't understand why those are required out there. And that needs to change, right? Cultural needs to change. That is also there, right? And technical depth. The lot of what is going to happen is that even if maybe security aware and you're doing out there, but when you want to go down and understand at the depth of technology what is required for the project, right? What tool can be used and what tool does not make sense, and what tool is the way the organization is going to go in the future. What you see in the organization in the next couple of years, where do you see the organization and the development team going on there? So because certain tools make more sense for the time present approach, but you are watching the team is growing, and as the team grows, scaling those tools may not be a good option, right? For example, Docker Compose or compared to Kubernetes, if you're having a team that is going to grow and you think the product line is going to go much further, going with Kubernetes makes much more sense out there. But you need to understand that. Similarly, you need to have understanding of security products that are there and how you're going to implement those things, right? Those are the criteria for that is going to be there. So how do you overcome these security challenges in DevOps, right? How do you overcome the security challenges in DevOps? Before we go about this, any questions till now? Anyone having any questions? Fine. So, so overcoming security challenges has multiple approach. One is shift left, incorporate security from the earlier stages of development life cycle, thus reducing chances of late stage vulnerabilities, right? And security as a code implement security measures as part of the code itself, enabling automation, enforcement, and security policies, right? Look at the code level itself. What is happening out there? Is there any vulnerabilities in the code? It is an earlier stage that you are going to identify the vulnerabilities that is going to uphold it, right? Continuous security, meaning just like your other components of DevOps, where you're doing continuously deploying and things, for every deployment, I should be able to monitor the security. I should be able to test for security and things like that, right? And finally, the more important thing, training and awareness with the security skill set for the company organization, right? So let's dive deeper into shift left approach. Let's dive deeper into shift left approach. So in a typical DevSecOps, software development lifecycle, what is going to happen is that here we are expanding the traditional software development lifecycle, to integrate security in each and every phase. What is the different phases? There is a design phase, there's a coding phase, there's a testing phase, there's a deployment phase, and finally there's a security testing. So what do you mean from this? What is happening out there? Give me a second. Let me connect. Okay. So, so what is happening out here, right? So here we see the process is the security testing on the right side corner, right? After deployment, there is security testing out there. And this is where your penetration testing is happening out there, right? Most of the time, which I'm predominantly more involved in penetration testing. I do work with a couple of projects on DevSecOps, but predominantly I'm working on penetration testing. And as you might have seen, I've tested more than 300 plus applications out there. What is the problem with this approach? Right? What is the problem with this approach? It is there. You have to think. The problem with this approach is the testing is coming at the later stage. There have been many cases, right? In one of the cases, what happened was there was a particular application which is very important, right? Where they need to launch that application in next couple of days, and they told we have done development and everything is set. We have done the functional testing and everything is that we're just needing the go ahead from the security team telling that there's no issue with that part, right? And this is a similar to an OTT platform, right? They're running some mini movies or their short films, and which is a paid subscription. And they come to us for that security testing, and we find a lot of vulnerabilities into that, right? A lot of vulnerabilities are there, and we give them that this is the list, and they're shocked, right? They're a couple of days away from launching that website, telling that they've already set up with a lot of marketing and budget and ads and everything is there, and there's a huge budget waiting out there for that to do those activities, and we can tell them that you can't deploy this product because there's a lot of vulnerabilities out there. Because one example was that it was about $300 as an example. If it was $300 was required for an annual subscription, or we can bring it down to $3, right? That we were able to pen test, and we were able to reduce the fees for that, and we were able to do a lot of things as well. There were some premium movies which could be seen for free, and multiple things were there. And now when it went back to the drawing board, they saw that it will take another 2 months for them to fix this. And the once because the application is quite large and they have to fix this vulnerability in each and every instances. And they thought at minimum, they're going to take another 30 days to fix it. If they're working, really pushing and fixing all the bugs, and if we are supporting them, it is going to be there. That's a huge problem, with pushing your product for a month. Think about the money that you're going to lose in terms of revenue, right? Now, there's not only you're losing in terms of revenue, the code is also going to be not optimized because they're doing it in a hurry now. It is not the way the application code is going to work. It is a patchwork. It is just like cooking and adding if you forget certain ingredients and you add it later, it will still not taste as good as it's supposed to be. Right? Same thing happens out here, right? If these people had accepted, if that reached out to a security team telling that this is the product we're going to come, can you tell us what are the problems that we could face in the future? Can you sit with us? Can you sit at the design phase and tell what is happening out here? What can it be done? What can be done to make it much more secure? Right? Are we doing it in a proper way? Is the coding, what are the design cues that you're given out there? What are the mitigation testing? What are the things that you have been given? Have we implemented in the code? Is our code is actually working it's supposed to do? Right. And
Sorry,
that is what,
Karthik.
yes.
Sorry to interrupt. There was a question
Hmm.
from AK that how does a DevOps collaborate? How does a DevOps engineer collaborate with developers to secure their code? The collaboration part.
Yes. So usually what happens is that, let's say, uh, let me, so usually a development team will have, wireframing and process like this, right? So they will come up with the product telling her. So let's say this is a mobile application process. Let's say, let me open the tab, make a new tab out here. They are going to tell these are the different front-end queues that we're coming up with, and this is the approach that we are going to go about this process, right? So now they will ask us what is the issue with that? So for instance, let's say there is a login page, right? So for instance, let's say this will be probably a much more better way of approach. So development team will come and tell, right? So this is our approach. These are the five screens out there, and we will look into that and tell. We'll tell there is a login page here. In the login page, what are the security features that you're going to add out there? As its security team, I'm asking about them. What are the features? Probably the more first time around, development team will not have any idea. So we'll tell it is possible to have an SQL injection out there. It is possible to have a session hijacking or session fixation issue. We'll have a list of vulnerabilities that could happen out there on the front login screen itself. Because as a pen testers, we saw, as I explained last time, there's a huge checklist, and that checklist is actually dependent on the features that are there, right? Even for a forgot password page, it could be a lot of issues could happen out there. For instance, let's say someone clicks on your forgot password page, they know your email ID. They're going to put your email ID. They know you're in that Apply website. They'll click on it, right? And they'll put your email ID. What is going to happen? You're going to get a mail in your inbox telling that your reset password reset is there for that. What if they do the same process for 1,000 times or 10,000 times or 30,000 times, right? It is possible out there. Can we can put that number of reset links, requesting that many request links out there, right? So at that time, your inbox is going to be filled up, right? For this not to happen, there should be certain kind of a mechanism out there. So we are going to ask, we are going to look at the feature the developer is going to come up with or discussing with. Then we tell them this is what the process that has to be there at the design phase. Okay. Then at the coding and the testing phases, there are cases where we again check for this. And finally, this is confirmed that the security feature what we have given is implemented and it is working as intended when we do the pen testing of the application. Right? That is how we integrate the in the design phase. Okay. Hope that answered your question. As a DevSecOps engineer, you're going to interact a lot with the development team, and you're going to be involved in the each and every stages of the development. Pretty bit less on the coding part. You're going to be a bit less on the coding part from a design perspective, from a test perspective, from a deployment perspective, right? And right after the pen testing perspective, you're going to be there as well. Predominantly whatever we did in pen testing. So if you remember, we spoke about running Nessus scan or a web application scanner in the previous part. We are doing the same thing, but instead of doing after deployment, we are bringing those to an earlier stage. Before deployment, we are doing out there, and we're trying to automate that process. Every time taking that link and putting it into an a software tool and then running the scan will take your time because you're sitting idle for the entire process. But what if I can do an automation with that? It's going to save a lot of time, and that's what basically that's going to be there, right? So that is the right. So is emphasized on collaboration, right? It is more integrated in security principle practices tools into DevOps. We are implementing security on each and every phase, right? So we are going to either on the planning phase, the coding phase, testing and everything, even at the monitoring phase, right? Let's say if someone is having a lot of requests coming into play, if I told forgot password page, I can send 20,000 requests in a very short span of time. If the monitoring is not done, if the monitoring is not done, it is not going to be possible to prevent such kind of an attacks, right? Monitoring is also part of it, logging is also part of it, and that is all. So now the tools are a bit more mature, and we are able to much more streamline the process into this, right? Jenkins plays a very important role, as we see in our main course. In the paid course, we see we are going to use all the tools to do it manually, and we'll understand how to do those tools manually. And finally, we take that manual tools and put it into a DevOps CI/CD pipeline under Jenkins process, right? So in cybersecurity, it's a bit more Jenkins is a bit more comfortable because it comes with a lot of add-on tools which are already present out there, right? I think GitLabs and other are also coming into play. And very short span of time, they're going to be able to provide much more seamless approach there as well, right? So GitHub also provides a lot of security. You will know how to integrate it. at the code level itself. Analyzing code analysis and all is coming a bit more easier at the core, the base itself, right?
Okay. Karthik again, sorry. Alex has again a question. Does login include documentation?
Login does not include documentation, right? Usually what happens is that login depends on the team that you're going to be there. Let's say if there is a SOC team available out there who is doing the process for you, so they will have a huge cabin in the computer in an you can tell it as a war room, right? You can call it as a war room where they will have a status update of every few seconds, right? Something as simple as plugging in USB into a company laptop will go give up an alert to the SOC team out there, and something more sophisticated as an rate limiting attack. Just I spoke about that. That is also going to process come up out there, and it is going to give them the immediate of that. But all of this is happening. What is happening is either you're doing using a SOC team or you're doing, let's say, once in 15 days or 30 days because you're running a small company and things and all. There, every time there is an kind of an activity, a log is generated. Meaning every time, let's say I open my computer and I connect to google.com, there is a log in Google server stating that Karthik specified connected to the google.com from this server on this machine, right? Or they will have information about my machine, my IP address, and some other things that are there that uniquely identify my laptop, and it will be stored out there in the process. So now, when your log analytics basically means here is that if I have done about 10,000 requests very short span of time, now they can know that 10,000 requests are coming from one particular device. Why is that? That is the suspicious behavior of that. Documentation here probably is very less because you usually don't have time for the documentation, right? You have to be proactive. You see, there's an alert out there. You have to do a lot of mitigation activities immediately. Uh, it will have some amount of documentation, but most of the time it is very less. It is not as intensive as penetration testing because in pen testing, what happens that if you find vulnerabilities, also you have to document. If you don't find vulnerability also, it is much more bigger issue, right? You have to give a detailed description about what are the things that you tried and why, and it did not succeed, and you have to justify why you have not found any vulnerabilities out there. Right? That's the thing about that. Yeah. So in terms of documentation, only PT is more document intensive. The other it's not going to be less, right? And tools like Splunk or Prometheus, I think they will have some kind of a report generation tool that can be used by you to create the report and send it across to the teams as well. Not going to be an issue with that part, right? So what are the benefits of DevSecOps? You know, proactive security by integrating security from the potential identifier address and earlier. So meaning you are securing the application at much earlier rate, right? It is the impact, even if there is an attack, when you are addressing security at an earlier stage, even if there's an attack, the impact is going to be very less, right? For instance, let's say you're standing right below a coconut tree or anything, something falls off. Instead of falling on your head, it will probably fall on your hand or your leg or something like that, where the impact is going to be less. You still are attacked, but the impact is going to be less, right? Cost effective. Rectifying security issues later in development cycle can be expensive. Mitigate this cost. And this is very much true, right? For instance, let's assume is someone I'm sitting with the developer and telling that, see, this is the login page and these are the security features that you have to add. And while his coding is going to add, that is going to be a couple of lines more is going to add out there. Probably it will take him another day extra to write that code out there. But if that is not rectified at the design phase, when it goes to post production, what happens is that they have to come back to the drawing board. They have to redesign the application, rewrite the code, redo the testing completely. Not only that from a PT perspective, they have to do the functional testing as well and then redeploy. And this is going to add cost to that. Not only that, they can't bring certain features to the market yet because of the vulnerability. That is going to have a much more bigger impact. A lot of people, when they talk about security, they talk about from an operations cost perspective. From a trust perspective, that is going to have a huge impact. right? Think about it got identified in pen testing. The cost is going to be significantly high. That is totally fine. But if there's a vulnerability, it was not even identified at the pen testing and it got hacked. The company got hacked because of that vulnerability. Think about the money they're going to lose, right? First of all, they may be losing the data to the hackers. Second thing, they are the company people, when they know about a certain company got hacked, they will be reluctant to use their services. And this happened in Target as well. Target supermarket in US, it was doing well. They got hacked around the month of October. They had to disclose that information because they're legally obliged to do that. But this happened somewhere around the month of November, and they got hit with economics very hard, right? Usually, most of the maximum amount of sales happens throughout the year. It is going to happen between the month of November and December, most probably because of in the Western countries, mainly because of Christmas, and a lot of people are buying presents, buying new things for the house and everything, and that they lost, and they it was such an impact. Thousands of employees all over the world were released, let go, and they had to close a lot of stores. I think I'm not sure, but I think that was one of the reasons why their Canada operations was shut down completely. They told no, we can't do further with that. So cost plays a very important role. I think Equifax, they spent about $120 million just to inform the customers who got hacked, right? Just to inform the customers that your account is compromised. Please make certain changes. They have to inform that to the customers whenever they get hacked. That it's think about the actual running cost, what is going to be there. So those things is going to be there. Speed is also going to be improved because you're not going to the post deployment, then coming back and doing it, and you're able to add at the much same at an earlier stage also, right? So enhanced collaboration with development, operations, and security leads to more resilient software solution. Yeah. So the collaboration is increased because of this. There is an you are much more interacting with the approach and it is much more easier. The first few cycles here is going to be a bit more difficult because there's a lot of learning. Because as a security person, I know what are the security features that comes into play, right? But when you go in there, it is not going to be the easy part because first of all, the developer has to understand what is that you're talking about, and they have to come up with the new strategies how to implement those things in the product life cycle, right? But when this cycle goes on a couple of times and things like that, if you for the first time they'll tell I don't have any kind of a security measure for login page. But when they do it for after a couple of probably for the second or the third product line, they will come and tell Karthik, these are the things I put up out there. Is there anything new? Right? At that time, my work is also much more easier because I'm reviewing the components, the mediation techniques is enough or not. Is there anything new required out there? Rather than completely redesigning out there, right? So it is going to add more weightage, but it takes a couple of cycles to for it to complete. But the collaboration is going to be much better, right? And it is not, it is a lot of reasons why we are seeing a sudden push for cybersecurity is not that everyone is getting hacked, a lot of companies are getting hacked, so we better be careful. That is that is one of the reasons, but that is not the leading driving force behind that. I've seen, I think it is a really hard, sad state that a lot of companies will not go for security as their main priority. They're more into business and features adding to the business rather than focusing on security. The reason why there's sudden push in security is compliance is coming into play. For instance, any financial companies which are there, based on the government, whichever the country they are going to be there, they will have a minimum of every once in a quarter you're get supposed to get your infrastructure structure tested, pen tested and checked out there. And if there's something critical vulnerability in that, they will have 48 hours to fix that vulnerability. If they don't fix that vulnerability, they have to close that functionality. And this can be a huge problem out there. And that is the reason why there's a sudden push because government is making security mandatory because the companies did not take it seriously for them. right? Because security has been there. Security issue has been there for last 15 years for sure, and last 10 years it has been very critical. And we saw the early stages of the this decade, and the companies did not do much about it, and government had to put in there, and compliance organizations had to put in there, tell that this is what it's supposed to do, right? If your website is collecting any data about your credit card information, there is a bare minimum approach that you're supposed to put, right? And that is the reason you see a lot of organizations are not building their own financial transaction portals gateway. They're looking to a third party because they take out that, because they don't store customer information. Some other is storing that information out there, right? So that's the main advantage of it, right? So
So,
now, yeah.
Karthik, there is again some question from Whale, and so anyone wanting to ask any question, you can unmute yourself and can speak out, because mm, it is one way it is good, but we uh, always have to look into your chat and whether there is some question. So you can unmute yourself and speak out. Anyway, Whale has asked, as a DevOps engineer, what are the things we need to put into perspective during the design phase of a product?
From a security perspective, you mean to say? See, let me, I think probably Will is asking basically about what are the things that you need to take care while doing the integrating security in your DevOps as well. So we can broadly divide the security into infrastructure and application security. So infrastructure basically deals about the underlying servers that are going to be used out there. So here there are two components. One is the uh, AWS, or in your case, you may be using AWS services. In some cases, you're going to be using on-prem, you're using VMware out there. So there is an enterprise level or organization level DevOps team, or a operations team will be there, not DevOps, operations team. They are going to be responsible for that. As a DevOps team, you're going to be responsible for the containers that you're going to use, or if you're using a very specific software that you're going to be using, or sorry, any specific virtual machine that you're going to be using out there, you're responsible for that, right? You have to understand what are the bare minimum configurations that needs to be set up. Do we need to set up SSH? What SSH configuration has to be enabled? Do we enable password approach? Do we enable root login? You're going to look into that. Then probably you may be running in web services, and what are the default configuration that need to be there. And you may be having a database server as well. What is the default configuration that needs to go into that place? So those are the things that we need to take into consideration out here, right? From an infrastructure perspective, you also look from an web application perspective. There it is a more of an coding approach, right? So that is how we are going to look into that. So divide that process. Then again, as you remember, there are three ways of having an issue. There is a coding issue, there is a configuration issue, and there is a vendor software is having some kind of a vulnerability. Vendor software you don't have any kind of an control over. You can only do thing is that to check whether that particular version is having any vulnerability. If it is having vulnerability, then you're going to update it, right? And that is what we are seeing here. You can see the third point here, software component analysis, composition analysis. That is what it does, right? Configuration is also done by you, and the coding part is what SAST and DAST is basically about. So that is what we'll talk about the continuous. How do we do the CI/CD, and what are the things that will come into play in the next slides? Sorry, right? So in CI/CD pipeline, what happens is that understand one of the most difficult part in any CI/CD pipeline for DevSecOps, right? It is going to be static analysis, application security testing, right? Or security incoming. Here, there's a lot of tools that come into play that can be used. One of the tools that is going to be used is SonarQube. From a DevOps engineer perspective, you have very limitation to what you can do here. Predominantly, you're going to run the tool here, and the report is generated and hand over the report to the development team, right? It is them, they will be able to understand this report. If you are good at coding, it makes you will understand it better that you can do that part, right? And we've also seen, let's say when our students are interviewing, they're going out to the industry and reaching out, and there are a lot of openings out there which are high paying, but they tell we need someone who can take the code written by the developer, go through it line by line and analyze it, what is happening out there, you know. And those are the things that is going to be a bit more on the complication side. But most of the time, 90% of the time, you're going to run the tool on your CI/CD pipeline, and the Sonar Cube is going to run it, is going to generate a report, and then you're going to send it to the developer. And the other one that we are going to do is going to be dash tool out there, right? So how do you integrate a dash tool? Something like OWASP Zap is one of the tools that can be used. It is just like a scanner, right? You don't have to do anything. Put the URL in the scanner and click on scan button. It will go through, it will have a huge number of list of tests that it will do, and it is going to give that report to you. And this is some report that you can actually understand as a DevSecOps engineer. You're going to sit with the development in team and tell them this is what is happening out there. And the next is software composition analysis. Basically, this is about you are going to use a lot of third-party vendor softwares which you're not having any control over. This particular tool will tell whether the tool that you're using is it safe or not. For instance, there's components like jQuery, Bootstrap, and things that are used in front-end development. It will look at that and tell them this particular version is having vulnerability, right? Don't use it. So it will flag it out for you, and probably you can make modifications to that and do that part. And finally is penetration testing and vulnerability analysis. And this is the reason why we have CI/CD pipeline and security integration into that is so that we don't have to do pen testing quite often, and we don't have to do vulnerability analysis quite often, because your servers are going to remain the same. You're not going to update it quite often. So if I scan it in once in 3 months, it's quite good enough, right? Unless until if there's some major updates is happening on the server, then you have to make a decision to run a scan after that. But if you're not running any kind of an update, usually once in 3 months is totally fine. Basically, we do tell once in 3 months is basically is that apart from having a third party software in your application, there could be certain tools that are there. Recently some zipping tool had a backdoor installed in it for a very long time. No one knew about it. It was in Linux, and finally it was identified, right? So how do you know about that tool? You don't know because you wouldn't have installed the tool also. It come as a default package in your Linux. How do you know that? So that is when you do the scanning process. It is going to work with that. So pen testing and vulnerability analysis can be reduced based on a particular duration, or if there is any kind of an all of a sudden there is an increase in the approach, right? But when we DevOps pipeline and CI/CD pipeline, you can see there's a process is quite the same, right? Process is quite the same. Only thing that is changing here is that the tools that are going to be used. From a source code perspective, SonarCube and checkmarks is quite used, most commonly used out there. And actually nowadays you're getting, there's a lot of support from GitHub also. Your GitHub, what are the Git, like Git, Bitbucket, GitHub and GitLabs are building their own packages, which when you upload a code repository to the online Git repository, it will actually check for the process of it, right? How exactly is happening. Then configuration management tools like Jenkins and other things are also coming into play. All those things will do. And for scanning, you're seeing OWASP, ZAP is there. OWASP, source checker is also is there. It is going to do a lot of activity for the process. And finally, the Splunk and Catchpoint are there for monitoring purposes, right? So each and every steps is going to be available out there. So from a training perspective, what we saw in the industry is what we're doing on our mainstream training. From a secure code perspective, we are using SonarCube, right? And from an DAST perspective, dynamic, we are using WASZAP. Because WASZAP is a free tool and a lot of companies do work. And this is also one of the bigger universities in US. One of our candidates was interviewing for them. So they ask how well you are using OSR, right? And they're not someone with a small team or small project. They are collecting a large data set, something in terms of millions of users information. It is there to analyze some kind of a data. Okay. It is something related to genome manipulation and things like that, understanding the DNA sequencing and process like that, similar to that. So they are using OVAS Zap as well, right? So it is a very good product that is there. And for SCA component, there's sync, and again there's again a OS product for that. We're using both of them in there. And finally, there's something called as a preview scanner for doing the your Docker images scans on that. And finally, it brings out the deployment production into that. So there are different approaches to doing this activity, right? So it will always, from a security perspective, DevSecOps, the advantage here is that number of tools are very less out there. So there is not a huge learning curve compared to DevOps, because in DevOps, amount of tools that are there are huge, and most of the time you're going to be worried more about is which is right tool to go and which is the wrong tool, which is the one which is focus as of now, right? So one of the things, just one second, let me have some water. Sorry. So I didn't get the question. What was the question out there? I think it's been answered. Yeah. No, there's no sound issue. I'm just having some kind of a sore throat, having some water. So threat modeling is that design phase process that we are looking at that, right? Threat modeling will require some kind of an understanding of how the product lifecycle goes on, and much more. It is going to be there is how do you about the vulnerabilities, you need to have a clearer picture of that, right? Predominantly, you will see a lot of, if you go to the industry, you will see a lot of pen testers are there, and you will not see most of them more than 5 years of experience in penetration testing. That is basically because as you grow further and further in penetration testing role, you either branch out to DevSecOps or you go into much more into managerial role where you're managing the pen testing team out there. And long term, you don't see that process. But it is a good thing to go into DevSecOps. That is what your approach is, because it is a natural progression. Because you're seeing so many vulnerabilities that you're identifying out there, and you think you're doing the same thing again, you're finding the same things out there. You think, what can I do to reduce this? What can I do to reduce the vulnerabilities? Because your goal as a pen tester is to secure the application. You're breaking the application, that's what true. But your reason for breaking that application is very simple, right? So when you go from a pen tester perspective, it is more into a Lego blocks perspective where you're able to assemble the application piece by piece. And at the same time, you can dismantle it and understand how the pieces come together, understand for that process. And that is the main thing about that. So what is your approach, right? One of the things question you asked earlier is the same thing. What is my approach for threat modeling? For you to start up with that, you have to understand what is the bare minimum security that needs to be placed, meaning the priority. What is the security feature? How important is the security? Right. For instance, let's say you may be someone, maybe an organization who's collecting social security numbers, credit card information, and other financial related information of an user. And at the other end, you have your local gym who's collecting your address and phone number, right? And is collecting other information like your age and other physical features that you it's going to be there. So who is supposed to give more security, right? So what is the minimum security requirement? Does your local gym needs to provide an high security process? That is not required out there. Whereas when you're collecting social security number, much more other information which can be used to identify you and which can also be used to compromise your identity, at that time security needs to be more. So that is one thing you have to see. Second process that comes into play is likely identify the likely threats. What are the different ways an hacker can steal the data or compromise the data is what we have to do out there. So that is the list of things that is there. Then once you're done that, identify the likely threats, you do a threat assessment, right? Understand like this, a lot of times, since DevSecOps is a very new component, a new role that we are seeing out there, and there's a sudden increase. When you go for an interview, there's a lot of places they will ask you is that we don't have any DevSecOps, expertise at that level. And since you're coming from a DevSecOps role, can you help us build up the security in the company itself? Those are the things that will going to be there. And that is what you're going to do. You're going to identify the threats that are going to be there. Then you're going to do a threat analysis of the threat assessment. Where is the company standing out there? Do they have any kind of a security? A lot of time the companies will have some form of security, but they will not know that is what is cybersecurity is, right? They will have passport policy, they'll have the access card policy out there, and they'll have a lot of things that is already in place, but they will not know that is what security is. They think something related to coding and the things that is also important, but they would have already have some kind of a base. But you need to do an assessment, understand where exactly the problem is. For instance, when you go take your car to a service, the mechanic is going to look at the car and he's going to start the engine and see is there any funny sound. Probably you'll take the car for a ride to see how the car rides and things and all. Then he'll come up with a plan telling that this everything is working fine, but these five components were not working as intended. So after that, what is going to do? Then is going to do tell this is the mitigation. Either I have to change the part or I have to engine oil has to be applied or some kind of a thing. So many things are going to be there. So that is what threat mitigation is going to be there. Yeah. So then you're going to do those and repair the products and confirmation of threat mitigation, meaning then is going to start the car and take it for a round and see whether that problems is going to occur also. In similarly in threat modeling, how do you confirm the threat mitigation? Right? So how do we confirm the threat mitigation? That is what the process that will come into play. So that is threat modeling. So, so we'll do one thing, right? Can we take a break for 5 minutes and come back? So then after that, we can continue with the remaining process. Okay. In the meantime, anyone of you having any doubts, please put them in the chat. I'll be able to happily go through that and I'll answer those when we resume back as
I
well. Okay.
think 5 minutes break will be good because if anyone have some question and discussion, we
Yes.
can.
So we can definitely we can do with that part. Yeah. So let's have a 5 minutes break and we'll come back after that.
Hello everyone, this is Menon. So guys, do you have any questions so far now? Do you are you finding this our workshop more interesting, or if you have any question, feel free to ask. And then again, will proceed to our uh, on our coursework. As you can understand, it is a in our internship program as well as our main training. We always have more students who are not at all from
IT background. So we are always very much cautious that we should not you know provide more information within a short time interval. So sometimes it's become a little bit overwhelming. So please unmute yourself. So it's supposed to be a interactive session. Any type of question is highly appreciated.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, hi.
Yeah, so I just joined the meeting, so I don't know what is going on. So for the complete beginner, is there any training program or it is just the internship, like how it is?
We do have a full job ready training that is a 6 weeks long,
Mm-hmm.
Monday to Friday, uh, daily 2 hours.
Okay,
So that the program's main goal is to prepare anyone, regardless they are IT background, non-IT background, and make themselves prepare for job ready. And we have a huge success stories. We had students from accounting background, hospitality background, educational background, not at all IT, and they have successfully landed job in as a DevSecOps engineer,
okay,
cybersecurity analyst, or a penetration tester in a service company or Forbes 500 company, and few have also
okay.
secured their position in a product-based company as well.
So you just provide the training or you help in the job role also, like job assistance also, or getting the job?
See, getting we this training itself a job ready training, including training, hands-on lab, live project work, cast done project. And then we do have a huge database on interview question and answer. We have a resume library, or you can create the template you can have and create your resume, and you can communicate with your trainer that hey, as per our my background, this resume is aligned or not. Apart from that, we do have some kind of a separate group for interview prep. So mostly all of our alumni students they join over there and they share their interview experience, and along with some of our coordinator and industry expert. So that is a close discussion session, and they communicate that this type of question I have got, and this is the answer I have given. So do you think it is right or wrong? Should I take another approach? So yeah, more or less, US job market is not that much good, but still, those students are really, really proactive. They somehow secure their job within 2 months after the course.
Okay.
I think there is a miscommunications in the cybersecurity meeting link. So previously, in the cybersecurity batch, the internship on which we have uh, done in March, April, it was in evening batch, 8 p.m. I think some of our students they got the same invite for 8 p.m. instead of 8 a.m. So no worries. You will have those who have missed. They have the recording, and we'll have another session. So if they have any doubts from this after going through this video, we can take some extra times to cover up this session. Karan, do you have any other question? Feel free to ask.
Nothing for now. If I get anything, I'll ask because I just got the link because I also expected it was in evening and I just got a message that the
Ah,
meeting. Yeah, so I just joined it. So let's see how the session goes. If I have anything, I'll surely ask you.
sure. And we already had two session. I think DevSecOps introductions and another fundamental of DevSecOps in last two weekend. If
Okay.
you have a time, please, those videos also available in the group, in our WhatsApp group, the video link. If
Okay,
you have a
because
time, please go through.
I'm not. I think so.
Yeah.
I'm not added to a group.
No, it's not added. There is a Whenever you ping us, the first message you have received in the below there is a our group WhatsApp group
Okay.
link is there.
Anyone else? Anyone else
And
having any query regarding the what we have done till now, or from a DevSecOps perspective, what we have discussed till now?
Hello,
oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
can you hear me?
Yes,
yes,
Alex.
Alex. You can hear.
Okay, yes. I was wondering because I remember you were talking about logging. So I became curious if logging is more of a wider range of using or a broader state of using Active Directory, because you do have to, with using Active Directory from an operations point of view, you do have to monitor the some of the authentication. Is that correct? So is um, logging sort of similar to Active
Uh,
Directory, but at
no.
a larger scale?
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a confusion out there.
Mm,
Uh, it is yes and no, right?
okay.
Logging is there's a two process we can take into play. Login we use when you log into the application, when you identify yourself to the application. For instance, when you enter username and password, that is
Mm,
taken as an authentication process. Okay.
mm,
When we
mm,
talk about there's a lack of logging functionality and things like that, we are not talking about how you're actually getting inside the application. Meaning I'm not talking about entering my username and password. I'm not
mm,
doing that activity out there. Okay. For instance, I'll tell you exactly what I mean from that. For instance, I have a web application server running in this virtual machine.
mm.
Okay. So for instance, I think it is not started.
Karthik, you are not sharing.
Okay. Okay. One
Oh,
second.
yes,
So
yes.
before you continue, we continue our session. I have one more question I have received
Okay.
that so please let me clarify. Our next interval time of 1 month, 1.5 months or 2 months to of
You're breaking up, man.
audible now?
Yeah, it's breaking it.
Okay. Let me go inside. So we have an interval of 1.5 months or sometimes 2 months in between two of our job ready training. So our last job ready training, our main course is going to end this week. So luckily we can start our next job ready training, which is going to conduct in August 2, 2nd August. Timing uh, every day, Monday to Friday, 2 hours. Uh, US evening, US and Indian morning time. So those students, and it is a limited class. We can have not more than 8 new student in one batch. And if anyone is interested, we have already like 40 to 50%. It is, I think the link is live. Yesterday only it is become live. So those students are, wants to join. Feel free to reach us because before it 8 number of the thing is closed. You can understand we can have only 8 students. The reason is the whole class is hands-on, and if it is a more than certain number of students, we cannot maintain the integrity of the classes, right? So
Yeah.
feel free to reach us and with the registration link if you cannot find in the group chat, and please complete the registration as soon as you can.
Good. So let me come back to explain what is log exactly is basically. Let's say I'm running this simple web page, right? There's nothing, this is a test page and things like that. So what is
Mm,
going to happen is that whenever I'm opening this page, there is actually something called as a file that is going to contain information telling that it is telling that this particular page got accessed by this particular IP address, and he was using a Mozilla Firefox for accessing for that, right? Any activity that is going to be done by you, probably even when you're doing an SSH access to a remote machine, that machine is going to tell this particular user logged into my system at this particular time. So collecting information about activities in a file is basically it is called as a logging out there. Okay.
Okay.
So there are many cases where you might have seen in my previous class, I told a company got hacked about 4 years back and they did not know about it, right? They were able to identify that because this something like this is happening because they started checking the log files and they saw that one particular ID was getting used and no one has track about that what that ID basically was, and they went into the logs certain much more. They saw that ID was created 4 years back, and that is how they know that they got at 4 years back on there. No, they were able to track, and they were that made sense with a lot of other things that was happening in real time. So basically, like more number of times you're going to, I think. So this is here. The more number of time I'm refreshing the page out here, it is just having that information now telling that this particular page is getting access quite often, right? And a lot of other things. So basically, logging means it is nothing to do with Active Directory. It's about collecting information about the actions of the user, right? And in the organization, it is not mandatory that Active Directory is going to be used all the time, because what is going to happen is that from a DevSecOps engineer perspective, certain organization will not use AD for authentication. At the application level, what they will do is that they might use a session token, or they might use an OAuth application or JW token for analyzing it. For instance, let's say, do you think you have an AD setup out there for your Amazon account? No, right? They'll have their own authentication mechanism out there. So it will always come down to what authentication mechanism that is being used and how do you verify that process. So in case, right, in case you're using an AD with your application, it may be internal application for employees only, and only those times you're going to use an AD out there. At that time, when you're doing policy management, it is not the development team's responsibility or the DevOps team responsibility for the password management or the anything related to the authentication process out there, right? There are certain things is required, but the team which is managing the AD will be responsible for doing a lot of other things, right? So how do you recover a password? What is the password length and things and all? So that are the things also we have to do analysis at the start of it. Who is responsible for what security measure that is present out there?
Okay.
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 So a lot of times what happens is that they would not prefer a single signer because it is going to increase the cost of the budget of the project out there. So certain projects will be used internally and they're using for some kind of a status update or things. Or let's say there was one very big banking company. They have a status, like they have many call centers all over the world for helping their customers. And the top management needed to have some kind of an understanding what is the staffing is happening out there, how many people are working in what percentage of people are present in those call centers, and how many calls received by them, and how many was successful, they were able to mitigate the customer feedback questions and things like that, they were able to
Mm,
answer, and which one was not done. So for that, integrating in AD is going to be a bit difficult, right? So they had a
mm,
normal authentication, and that is again a publicly available page. So meaning it is going to be displayed in the conference rooms and things for this particular list of managers only. So it again always from an you will need to know how the project or the application is working out there. So those are the that is what happens in a threat analysis phase. You are actually sitting with the development team and they'll give you a much more clear understanding of what the application process is exactly there.
okay.
Right. So that's all. Okay.
Thank you.
So, welcome. Right. So the next topic which is important is defense in depth is a strategy leverage multiple security measures to protect against organized assets. All right. So here, when it basically is about, as we can see, there's an onion out there. Onion has the multiple layers to that. So how is that we can add multiple layers into this process, right? How does that we have multiple layers into this process? Because from a DevSecOps perspective, you don't deal with certain security. For instance, how do you deal with data outage or data backup, right? There'll be an incident response team. They are usually responsible for the data recovery if there's an in case of a failure. So small organizations, again, it depends on the size of the organization. We had, helped out a, hotel chain, one of the biggest hotel chains in a very important city. They got hacked by a ransomware and everything data was lost because of it. So, but the next day they were up and running. They were next day up and running, no issues, because they had backed up the data till the day previous to that. So they lost 1 days of data, and that was updated because for every transaction there's also a paper trail that is going to happen out there, and it was not much difficult for them, right? So they had a backup and recovery, business disaster recovery process in play, and that was there. But that is again may not come under you. Predominantly, a organization will have multiple projects, and you're going to be part of one of those projects or one or couple of projects, not all of them, right? And it is much more going to process with that. So in defense, and that basically deals about what are the additional things that you can add out there, right? So a lot of time people talk about is they give. We have seen certain websites. The clients development team have done excellent terms in terms of coding. We could not find any kind of vulnerability, major vulnerabilities, which will actually get compromised. But we saw that their GitHub is actually not secure. They put it up in a public, so anyone is able to open up the code and see what is happening out there. And in some cases, there is a hard-coded password in the public domain, right? So how do we do that? So here the place is about how do you add more security at more different layers, right? So it will take more time for an attacker to get into this process, how to attack and compromise it. There will be incidents that you can't prevent any incidents, but breach can be prevented. Even if there's a breach, you can also reduce the impact. Security is not 100%. If people want to break into your organization, they'll always find it, right? That's not mandatory, isn't it? I think probably, let's say, if they could not break physically anything or cyber in terms of net and hack or anything, they probably a lot of cases in Microsoft was done because one of the passwords for one of the users was compromised, right? Whether that guy was blackmailed into giving away that password or someone social engineered him to give away that password, it's a bit different. The security was in place. There was no issue with the vulnerabilities out there, right? But the password was leaked. That was the issue out there, right? Secure code security, source code security is very important. As I told, unauthorized users can have sensitive data. So you have to make sure only the right set of people have access to the data and the code that is being given out there. Because certain times there will be vulnerabilities in the code that you have to identify that when they look at that code that could be there, right? And also you have to make sure your GitHub repository is properly authenticated. There has been cases where people are able to add a vulnerable code because they did not properly protect the GitHub repository or the code where they store their code. It has happened out there. They are able to push a code, insecure code into that or a backdoor into that, right? And if you go Google out FTP smiley attack, that was the case. The FTP was the software that was used for file transferring. The hackers hacked into the website where the software was downloaded and they put up a malicious copy of that FTP software out there. And a lot of people downloaded and they got hacked as well, right? So the code repository can be an injection attack, it is not securely. So all those things you have to get and data exposure, right? Who is having viewing that process out there? In some cases, you have to be very careful. What had happened was they had a repository for the main repository for the project, that was in a private mode. Only the developers are able to access that. But company also provided for each of the developers their own personal repository location where they can do some experimentation and things and all. That repository was not protected. Okay, that was made public. And we saw one of the developers, before pushing that code to the production environment, he was practicing on that. And if you view through that process and see the code, you can see the entire thing. At least the part of the code that he was working on, there's a history of it and it is available for everyone out, right? And that is very much important. You have to, from from a cybersecurity perspective, as a DevSecOps engineer, understand that you are going to have a bird's eye view of things. You need to have a bird's eye view of how things are happening. And there's a lot of training also that requires on that, right? Making sure that only a set of people are there, access it. And there's a lot of iteration process also comes into play. The first couple of months are going to be a bit more difficult, but later it's going to be there, right? You should not, same thing as I spoke right now, security provide information on known security vulnerabilities, help them understand, pull requests should be done properly checked, and protect the branches, pushing of the code should be, and who has access to that has to be very important. We have to be very take good for that. In the security DevSecOps, one of the other things that we see is that is the Dockers or the containers, right? The more components you are going to add, the more attack surface is going to increase, right? Let's say if you're having only one static web page, only that is having can be attacked. As soon as you attach my database to that, the attack surface increases. Now you have to protect the web page code as well as the database as well. And the more things you are going to add, the more it is going to be problematic out there. And when you attach container security, that is going to be an issue, right? When you're creating Dockers or anything, is there any security consideration when you're doing that? How do you know that your Docker container is secure? How do you know the components that you have installed in your Docker container is secure or not, right? So that also needs to be there. This has been the case, right? A lot of time when, let's say, you're using an Ubuntu container and you have not updated that Ubuntu container, you're using someone, let's say, an Ubuntu 18.04 version, which is no longer supported by the organization officially, and it is not a good idea to use as well, right? And if the security updates is not been done on that as well. So how do you know is the container secure or not? So is while running is there probably any hijacking privilege escalation processes that is occurring out there, right? Anything that is happening on your infrastructure, it is also again is going to happen in your containers as well, right? And again, lack of isolation, the compared to VMs, right? Virtual machines, they will have their own operating systems, they'll have their own RAM, they'll have their own process and own networking components. In Dockers, they're sharing the same operating system underlying, meaning the kernels is going to be shared among all the containers. So we have to be very careful. What is that? The process has to be followed out there as well. Is the containers having any issue, right? So how do you best practices is that always make sure you collect the latest whenever you do. Let's say if you're using Docker run Ubuntu, you can always make sure the tag is set to the latest one and always update, check a run scan on that. Always run the containers with the least privilege possible. And the user creations in the containers are also is very much important, right? That is there. Then also use a lot of monitoring tools, see how the containers are behaving. Is there something malicious happening out there? Is the container is busy for unnecessary reason? Is the container running processes that are not required for running that application? You have to do that part, right? And update the regularly is also important. That is where your CI/CD pipelines comes into your support. Whenever you're building a new image or whenever there's a code modification, you can always make sure you're pushing the latest images out there, right? And those are the things that is important. Also make sure the access control, who has access to your containers, the machines where the containers are running, and again who has access to your Docker Hub repositories. That is also very important out there. When you do all those things, this is security is always doing a lot of things right, right? It's going to be there. So what in our course we're using 3V scanner for doing all those, but there are a lot of other scanning tools out there for the security of containers. When you build the code, when you build the container, let's say you take the code, build a Docker image, then you push the code into that, and finally when you push it to the Docker Hub, after that, this scanner is going to download that particular image of your Docker, which is the latest image, and it's going to run a scan on them. If there's any vulnerabilities, we will know about that immediately, and then we'll be able to mitigate that process out there. And we go back in this CI/CD pipeline and identify out there, rather than identifying the safe process. And the last but not the least is the cybersecurity awareness training empowerment programs. This is because since I've always told in the start itself, DevOps or DevSecOps, it is more than doing a certain number of steps. It is more of a cultural approach. It is a way you approach to development, way you approach the plan and things and everything is going to be varying out here. So one of the main key reasons without having a proper security awareness training, getting the people on board, making them understand the importance of security, this is not going to be successful because end of the day, most of the cases when we see, it is not because there was a security code vulnerability that there was a breach in case. It is mainly because there's a human error. He clicked on something which he was not supposed to click, right? That led to the breakup of the application. That led to the leakage of the information and everything. So this is happening because that person is not dumb or anything. It happens because there's a lack of knowledge. What is the set of things that need to be done by them? All those things has to be set up out there. And this is where, as a DevSecOps engineer, you're going to be involved in this activity. You're going to conduct regular security awareness training for the organization, and this is going to help them out with that process, right? Now that is the main thing. So this, as we could see, DevSecOps is very much similar to DevOps. There's not much modification or changes here. But thing that is happening here is that we are taking certain modules, adding to the already existing pipeline, or already adding certain activities to the already existing process in the DevOps part. And that will help us protect the application and do this process out there, right? So that's the thing, that is what DevOps basically is about, and how do we use these tools is the main thing that is been covered in our main course, right? It is, DevOps from a market perspective, we are seeing a lot of improvement, right? There's a huge increase in market share. The more companies are providing services, and we as a service, right, from an organization perspective, for last almost about 8 to 9 years, we are more into penetration testing, and companies were asking more about pen testing services with them and ask them to test their application after whenever there is there. Now they're more interested in DevSecOps. They're also not only they're looking for someone to join their team, help them set up a DevSecOps, but they're reaching out to consultants as well to help them set up a DevSecOps. So they'll have a virtual environment. You're working as a consultant, but you're working with multiple teams in different projects in different companies, helping them with their DevSecOps journey out there. And we see there is a huge increase. And we saw in market share in DevSecOps in North America has increased about 35% in the year 2022 itself. And the packages is quite high as what we have seen. Pen testing is a very important role, but we are seeing security consultants, security analyst consultant roles are coming into play, and predominantly these are looking in as a DevSecOps roles as well, right? The problem with LinkedIn and job portals and things and all is that they don't tag the correct names for the security roles we have seen. A lot of times they will have security consultant or security analyst role, but when you open the job description there, you will see is actually DevSecOps roles that is out there. But we are seeing a similar salary for that process, right? Somewhere about 120, 130 as a bare minimum process that is going out there. And one more thing about DevSecOps role is that you work closely with your top management rather than working with, that you will have a much more better visibility on your work and it will help you grow in your organization as well because you are more interacting with the top management as well when the action goes on. Okay. So that is what basically is there from a market share perspective, right? So any questions, you let me know. We'll be glad to answer. Any questions, guys?
Thank you, Karthik, for your this wonderful session, and it is really uh, wonderful. One thing I would like to tell all of our joining. So we faced a very not trouble, issues in our DevOps batch, which has started in last Friday. So, like our cybersecurity batch, DevOps is also having a threshold limit. So we in the DevOps we can take only 10 new students. So, but after course registration, we are still having requests to for the enrollment, and I think there are 6 or 7 students we had to push them or request them for wait for another 1 month until unless the next batch is going to start. So please, guys, remember our this is like a first come first serve, and if you at least have some planning to register for this training, feel free to reach us out and communicate with our in any of our coordinators, so at least they came to know that you are joining.
Yes, guys.
So we are going to use the same link for our DevOps intern or workshop program, which is going to start after from now for next 2 hours. So those are willing to join the DevOps session also. You can stay, or those who have only joined for the cybersecurity. I think we are at the very end age of ending the session. I think someone is asking some question, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
So how do you answer questions about coding when they ask what you know about coding, if you do code reviews as part of coded in security in development
Yes.
process?
Coding perspective, that is going to be a bit from who's coming from a developer background, right? From DevSecOps perspective, more into operations and more into processes and design phase itself. But you're not actually writing any kind of a code apart from you're doing the infrastructure as a code, meaning you're writing in shell some script for running your CI/CD pipeline and things. From apart from that, you're not going to be involved with that, all right? And it will you need to understand or have a much more deeper impact on from a developer perspective that is going to be there. Okay. So it's a quite good to specify that you may have some kind of a Python experience or some scripting language experience, but you can specify out there that you're not comfortable with coding and you can actually drop out of those interviews it's required because there's a lot of things that is coming. 90% of the DevOps will not require any coding background.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hello, Mr. Katik.
Yes, Harry.
Good afternoon from Nigeria.
Good afternoon. Hi, welcome.
Yeah, I want to say a very big thank you to you, Mr. Debasis, and I think Mr. Menon. Well done for the good job you are doing. I have a question. I am very much concerned about the difficulty in securing internship with organizations. Um, for me, I think it has been very difficult. I have some other friends too who are interested in cybersecurity, and they
Mhm.
too are looking internship remotely, basically. But it seems impossible. I don't know. Is it a global problem, or is it? I don't know. Is it possible to get internship with an organization remotely? Is it possible?
It is possible. It depends on, I think, certain organizations, the data privacy importance will be there. So you need to be present in that particular country to work on their application and things like that. All right. So, but I think you should not have an issue working with any of the Nigerian based companies out there, working with helping them out with security and stuffs with that. That should not be an issue. Again, what happens predominantly uh, from a security perspective, since a lot of things are available online or a lot of training is available online nowadays, like what we do, companies do expect you to come with some kind of a knowledge out there before joining the internship, right? So their perspective is that come up with the knowledge, we'll help you with the work process because it is how to use a tool is a different thing, and again working in the organization is bit modified, so they are going to help out with that, but they will not help you. They are a bit more reluctant helping people out with how to use the tools that we are going to use and things like that. No, they will not be much more comfortable helping you how to use a Kali Linux, what are the different tools in Kali Linux out there. So under making you understand what is a web application from a security perspective, what is required. So explaining those things will be much more reluctant for them. But once you have some kind of a knowledge in play, there'll be much more, uh, process it's going to be there, right? Mm.
Okay.
Mm.
Thank you
Now
very
here,
much.
here one
Well,
thing
you're
I would like one thing I would like to add that if you are trying to secure a remote internship program with any big organization, please check. It is only possible. Suppose you are based in Nigeria and you are looking for a internship program based in US. Uh, this is only applicable if you have a valid work authorization in US, or the organization should have their branch or their office in Nigeria. Then only
okay.
it is possible. Or else, due to these government rules, it will prohibited that part. But there are hundred or more company, they have their branch office or their subsidiaries in most of the service based company. They have their branch or subsidiary in all over the world. So even if you
Yeah.
can secure a internship on those organization, and eventually you can switch to any Europe based country or US or Canada, like that.
I
Yes,
agree with you.
yes.
I agree. From what
So
Mr. Kati said, I think it is better to apply for a hybrid job, so that you can be physically present, maybe not every
Yes.
time,
right.
once in a while. Yeah, yeah. I think I got the point.
Yes. So we are also seeing a lot of our students who are getting placed in US. They're usually having an hybrid approach out there. So they're going to office once in a while, but predominantly it's a work from home option for them.
Lastly, I would like to share one of our that's thing I was trying to say, that one of our students' success stories. He joined. He from a different background, not at all IT. He joined in our a March batch, completed his training in uh, June. first week, and he somehow managed to bag 3 jobs. One is DevSecOps position, and two is as a uh, penetration tester in the in between in July end. So just think the
Wow.
DevSecOps, the biggest or the most intriguing part of having a DevSecOps expertise in your resume. You will find hundred or thousand job is available in the LinkedIn or any job market, and you can see those job was posted like 1 month before, and it is not closed yet. There is a very few competitions in this particular domain because DevOps itself are new, and DevSecOps is like how you are going to secure your DevOps infrastructure. So finding a good candidate from the market is the biggest challenge for the organization. So if you are having a 70-80% expertise on this particular subject matter, you are very good to go. And one of our students, he somehow successfully landed a product-based company with 190K salary per annum. So that is a
190K is or dollars.
US dollar, yeah. So now think that he has not as a freshers or having a 1 year or 6 months experience, getting that you will have that kind of salary when you work like 8-9 years of having 8-9 years of experience in data analytics or other field. Because this field is so hot, and you can check the number of job available in the LinkedIn and the number of experts available in this particular DevSecOps or cybersecurity is very less.
Yeah, and that is very much true because we were actually interviewing, as you know, in my organization, we were interviewing, and for 6 months we went on with an hiring spree, and we were interviewing so many people. And when we went on to connect with the one of the leading, job providing websites, we had actually exhausted about 90% of the list out there. So, and we told, okay, probably it is a good idea to probably hire someone and train them rather than going with the job market because right now in cybersecurity, that is how the shortage of skill set is, right? So, a small company can actually completely exhaust the candidates list out there. Mm, That is the
Very true. Thank you very much for your explanation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Hari. Thanks. Welcome.
Any other question? Or we should switch to our DevOps workshop for today.
Sure.
Please remember our next batch of cybersecurity and DevSecOps is going to start the next Friday, August 2nd.